Continuing on with position previews, Nebraska has a very strong veteran defensive line that did not get a lot of sacks and turnovers last season. But Gary, having Nash Hutmacher and Ty Robinson return as seniors, kind of the cherry on top here to me, because they have so much depth behind them.
I think you almost take them for granted, even though people don't really mean to. People are big on them. But it was Matt Ruler, one of the other coaches in the interview, said, if you get those two guys or two guys like that in the transfer portal, you think you hit a home run for your defensive line. So you have two, most likely, but I'd just, to be safe, say potential NFL players that are on your defensive line. And I go back and forth on the production side. I was talking to you about how the more I look at things and kind of reevaluate last season, as great as that defense was and as high ranked as it was, I guess I don't see it as great just because of like what you said. There wasn't a lot of sacks. There wasn't a lot of turnovers. But more importantly to me, there weren't a ton of 3 and outs. There weren't a lot of 3rd and shorts where they got off the field. You saw really good, as the field got shorter and in goal line stands, they did a really good job. You think back to that Illinois game, I think Illinois got down inside the 5 on one play. And then he tried all 4 times to get in. Defense stopped him. And I think that was coming off of a turnover. Those types of things are what great defenses do. And I think more importantly, when you're just in your second year, you're still shuffling some coaches around. You're kind of past instilling the culture that you want and the way you want practice done and the feel in the locker rooms and things like that. But it's still pretty new. Having 2 guys that are leaders on the team, leaders of the strongest part of your team, to come back. X's and O's are great for sure, but I think they're more than just that as far as meaning to the team. With them on the squad or, starting, back to what you said, it's a deep position, but if you lose those 2 guys, now all of a sudden there's a ton of question marks. So you'd like to think, we all heard about Hutmacher and the wrestling and slimming down and then putting more muscle back on, but still being a little lighter than last year. You still hope that those guys are developing and they'll be even better than they were. Like Jamari Butler led the team with sacks. He only had 6, but leading the team in sacks. And now he's back. He's a junior. You've got a pretty veteran core. And even when you start going into the 2 deep with guys, you don't have a lot of guys that are question marks at this point. You're just hoping they developed a little further and maybe sharpen some other skills that's going to make it a little bit better. 3-3-5, I mean, you can argue what the most important position is on your defense. I want to say it's the DBs just because you got 5 out there and they have to come down, and their responsibilities between run stopping and obviously defending the pass varies greatly, situation, game to game, play to play. But you do have to be solid up front. I think there's plenty of room for improvement when you go back and look at things they did last year. So having all 3 of your starting vets coming back, I think it's a big deal. And I think kind of like we saw in the receiving core, we talked a little bit in the last video, your veterans are your anchors, so to speak, but you can see kind of what they're recruiting and what they're trying to bring in when you look at the guys that are behind them. When you look at Cam Leonard, which was obviously recruited originally by Mickey Joseph, but decommitted when they basically pulled his scholarship, and then Rule and those guys, when they came in, made it a point to go back and get him. I don't want to come across like I'm taking it for granted or acting like it's not a big deal. It's huge. I'd be super disappointed or in a lot different position in reference to the defensive line if they left, as far as who's coming up and the question marks and things like that. But now you basically have a safety net where you can let these guys that are coming up see what they can do, prove themselves, get a feel in game, and not, well, that's what we got. If they don't work, we're screwed. You're solid up front. Find it hard to believe that they wouldn't be getting better, just not even individually. They're all really, really good players, obviously. But if as a unit they can get more pressure on quarterbacks, if they can, I don't mean to be just so black and white with it. They got a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. They just didn't get a lot of sacks. They didn't make teams really pay for that pressure all the time. And then hopefully the pressure on the quarterbacks turns into more turnovers in the secondary. They can't do a lot about the turnovers as far as from that angle, strip sacks and maybe ripping out some running backs. But I think exactly to echo what you said, I think it's the most consistent. DB's pretty veteran heavy, but I mean, you've got a combination of veteran depth and like the consistency. I don't think there's really anybody on that defensive line that we saw last year that's returning this year that you were like, well, you don't know what you're getting this game. Game to game, they're all pretty solid. You pretty much know what you're going to get. It would be nice, like Rula said, and Tony White's even talked about, and Terrence Knighton earlier in the summer, if some of those guys just marginally got better. And I think that's obviously in the trench there. It's going to set the tone kind of for the rest of the defense. But I'm super glad to have those two back. And I'm pretty sure it was Rule. I could be wrong, but whoever it was that said that about if you pull those two guys in the transfer portal, you're ecstatic. You know, you think you hit a home run. So I mean, when you look at it from that aspect, especially, it's like one of my least concerning positions on the squad is that front.
You said you know what you get with them, and I mean that's just so true, to the point that I feel like I'm just glossing over them. I feel like I don't even need to talk about them. But for the record, I'm in love with both of them, Nash and Ty. To me, they both remind me of better versions of Jared Crick.
Better than Jared Crick?
Neither of these guys have Ndamukong Suh ragdolling 3 linemen on the other side of the line so that you've got the weakest lineman. No offense to Crick. Crick was great. But imagine Nash Hutmacher on the other side of Ndamukong Suh or Ty Robinson on the other side of Ndamukong Suh. I think they could have done just as much, if not more, than what Jared Crick did.
Right. The other side of that argument, though, would be, what did Jared Crick do the season he was there by himself without Sue, and what would either one of them do without the other one, or without Jamari Butler on the edge?
Don't get mouthy.
Sorry, sir.
The point is, I want to talk about the up-and-comers just a little bit because they're so exciting. It's funny because we did a reaction to the Huskers initially recruiting Cam Leonard because he was like a 5-star, and it was like, hey, let's try this type of content. Didn't go well. Not a lot of people watched. Scared us away from doing reactions to recruiting. In that video, we both were like, nah, take him or leave him. We don't know. Can't tell. Dude blew me away when he got to Nebraska and started playing. Such a pleasant surprise. This has to be the last year that he comes off the bench because I think his talent dictates it so much. But Jamari almost leaving in the portal and then Rule having to go talk him into coming back, that leads me to think that he's definitely going to be the starter. You've convinced me of that. It makes sense. He is the sack leader. How much do you think we're going to see Van Poppel, Cam, or even Elijah Judy, who's a junior now, and they're saying he's going to get time?
I think you're going to see all of them quite a bit. I mean, unless for some reason the defense as a whole does a lot better job of getting off the field quicker, right? Be it turnovers to threes and outs. You're going to have some, especially for the big guys, you're going to have situations where they just need to come out because they're getting, tired. Cam Leonard is going to be essentially a starter, in my opinion. They rotate a lot with the extra linebacker, the extra defensive end, where you'd see that kind of hybrid spot where you've got even Sherman or Princewell that are technically jack, outside linebackers that will go back and forth playing the edge. And that's where wouldn't be surprised you see a little bit of Cam Leonard in there, but he's going to spell, typically the end guy as it goes. I think Van Poppel, you'll see him a decent amount. Back to what you were saying about Cam Leonard, when we did that reaction video to him being recruited, we're basically just going off that IMG Academy highlight reel or whatever that he had. I remember my thing was he's got really good speed and great explosiveness off the line. My question marks were more like the physicality and like the mindset, the X's and O's, like understanding. And then you watch him like the first couple games, like even against Colorado, how quick he was getting to Shedeur. A lot of times it's like his mindset is like a veteran. You know what I mean? When he's not a one move type of guy to get around tackles and in between tackles and guards. Like he seems like he does a really good job of anticipating leverage and getting inside when they think it's outside and vice versa. And you compile that with the explosiveness and the speed. I just keep thinking another year with that guy developing. Again, like I said, with the front three, you just kind of assume, but you really hope that guys develop more. And it's like, you imagine if this defense is even better than it was last year and can just do a few more turnovers a game, or I'm sorry, overall for the season, a few more sacks, which is going to lead, obviously going to have even more pressure than you had last year if you're going to get more sacks. But I feel like everybody has and still is sleeping on Butler. Like Butler packed on muscle, trimmed down fat, however you want to word that, is supposedly more lean. He looks like the most NFL ready guy to me, just from a technique standpoint, if that makes sense. Like he just looks the part. He seems to be completely in. I was worried when he was looking at transferring when the coaching exchange took over and then coming back. It's kind of like, is he a 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of guy? This is before you kind of understand and learn that Rule's not dealing with that. You know what I mean? I think if he feels like a guy's like that, he's letting them know real quick. Your minutes are getting squandered. You're falling further down the depth chart. And if you're not sure, then leave type of a mindset. So watching him last year, when you hear him talk in interviews, when you see the chasing three, but when you see those types of videos and the kind of behind the scenes stuff, you get to see how some of these guys are like super dedicated, on their own, trying to get better and improve and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the bigger jumps you see on the defensive line this year is from Butler. As far as Judy, I know he was kind of a big get last year in the transfer portal, and I haven't heard a lot. I'd be curious to see, one, what he thinks, but two, what some of the coaches think. And we never will, obviously, but I'm just curious of what that seemed almost like underwhelming. I don't want to say disappointment or whatever, because it's not like he was trashed or anything. I'm not saying that. Just the excitement and kind of how he was one of those higher prize gets out of the transfer portal last year to not be like a bona fide starter or like a big focal point. Is that a testament to how good those starting three are, that it's like good luck passing those guys up? Or is it a learning the system, kind of falling in line type deal? Or is it just, maybe that's why it didn't work out at A&M? I don't want to make assumptions on anything, but I'm super curious to see his growth and his impact this year compared to last year.